All right, we are talking about the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. And these are extremely important for a couple of reasons. One, they list out several freedoms or liberties that we all have. So these are rights that the government cannot take away from us. And the other big reason that the Bill of Rights is so important is, if you remember, when they were trying to pass the Constitution, there was a group of the Federalists and the Anti Federalists. The Federalists were in support of the Constitution, where the Anti Federalists were against it. And one of the reasons they were against ratifying the Constitution is because it didn't have a Bill of Rights. They wanted to make sure that those rights were specifically listed out. They didn't want to go back to how things were before under a king, where they had all these rights taken away. So they wanted to make sure that these were listed in there. So that was one of the deals that they made, was we'll support this Constitution as long as we get a Bill of Rights. So very quickly after the passing of the Constitution, they made sure to get the Bill of Rights passed. So within a few years, we had the first 10 amendments. So the first one is your freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, petition. This one's extremely important, and we're going to actually spend more time talking about that one in class. So I'm not going to go in depth right now. Number two is the right to bear arms or guns. This one is very controversial to some people, because some people don't think everyone should be able to have a gun, or how, where should they be able to have a gun? What should be all the rules or regulations, or the steps that you have to go through in order to gain access to a gun. But we all have the right to bear arms. The other part of this is that it says that each state has a right to maintain a militia. And during colonial times, it was common for groups of men to form these militias, which would be groups of men with guns, to protect their towns. And without these militias, we might not ever have gained independence. So that is Amendment 2. Amendment 3 is quartering troops. So it says that no soldiers are allowed to be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner during times of peace. And today it might not seem like this is very important or very relevant, but during colonial times, this was extremely important that they had this in there, because this was common British practice. But basically, it's saying that the government cannot force us to house troops in our homes during times of peace. We're not going to be forced to feed them and take care of them, that kind of thing. Amendment 4 is search and seizure. Amendment 4 says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So the government cannot just walk into your house, or like a police officer cannot just walk into your house for no reason without a warrant and just start going through your things, or can't just start searching. If you're walking down the sidewalk, police officer can't just stop and start going through your bag. So if a police officer ever tried that, you can say no, you cannot do that unless they would have a warrant or a court order. And that is only with probable cause, which means like reasonable grounds. They really feel strongly that you have something there that you're not supposed to, or it's evidence for something, that kind of thing. And police can't search or arrest or take evidence. And if they, without that warrant, and if evidence is taken as a result of an unlawful search or seizure, that cannot be used in court. So if you were walking down the sidewalk doing nothing wrong, not acting suspicious, police officer did not have a warrant to search you, then they can't come up and start going through your bag. And if they found a bag of weed, and that was an unlawful search, they can't use that against you in court. All right, and that one actually is pretty interesting. We just don't have a ton of time to go through all of that. But for a warrant, they are supposed to list out what it is, like where specifically they are searching or who they're searching and what they're looking for. So like if they are, at your house, they have a warrant to, like go look in your kitchen. They, and they're walking in the hallway and they see, your bedroom, and they can't just walk into the bedroom and start going through all of your drawers. Now, if they were walking through your house and in plain sight, they found something that shouldn't be there, then that's okay because it was in plain sight. But they can't just start going through, drawers or other things that aren't out there unless that's part of the warrant. All right, so the Fifth Amendment is rights of the accused. So there were actually several parts to this one, 5 parts to be exact. So one, it says a person can only be tried for a serious federal crime if they are indicted, meaning they are charged and accused of that crime by a grand jury. Another part of this amendment is no double jeopardy. This means that you cannot be tried for the same crime twice. So if you were accused of killing your best friend, you go to trial and you are found innocent. If later on they discover a confession or they find a serious piece of evidence against you, they cannot try you again for that exact crime. So that's no double jeopardy. Another major one that a lot of you have probably heard is your Miranda rights. So this is this is a way to protect yourself against self-incrimination. So basically saying that you don't have to answer. If the police are asking you questions and you don't want to answer, you don't have to. So you might have heard it called like pleading the fifth. Or when you hear the Miranda rights, a lot of you probably heard this in movies or TV shows when they say you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. So pleading the fifth, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. You can just ask for a lawyer. Another part says that the government cannot take private property for legitimate public purposes unless they give you a fair price. That is called eminent domain. So they can't just take it from you. They would have to have legitimate reason and they would have to pay you for it, a fair price. And the last part is the due process of law. So the government has to respect all legal rights owed to a person under law. So they can't take away your life, liberty, property without going through all those legal proceedings. So as the Fifth Amendment. So next we have the Sixth Amendment. This is right to a speedy and fair trial. So like it says, the right to a speedy trial. So if you're convicted or charged with something and you're waiting trial, you shouldn't have to wait years and years and years and years before you actually go on trial. The next part there is a fair trial. So you are given the right to have an impartial jury. So one that is not automatically going to be biased against you. It's supposed to be a jury of your peers. So one example of I should say maybe a biased jury would be maybe if you are, if you're Black and every single one of the juries are white and there's even evidence of a couple of them being racist against African Americans. Well, then that would not be an impartial jury. That would not be fair. Another part of the Sixth Amendment is that you have to be informed of the charge. You also have a right to an attorney, and you also have the right to cross-examine any witnesses against you. The Seventh Amendment is the Trial by jury in civil cases. If you remember, a civil case does not involve any kind of criminal matter. So it's not that necessarily that someone broke a law here. It's that someone believes that someone owes them payment for some type of wrongdoing. And this is guaranteed if the amount is over $20. However, they could both agree to just have a bench trial where there is just a judge and no jury. But you do have the right to have a trial by jury in civil cases if you want it. Number 8, limits of fines and punishments. So some of you may have heard this one called like no cruel and unusual punishment. So you need to make sure that the punishment actually like fits the crime. So if you go to Dollar General and you swipe a candy bar, obviously that's terrible, but the punishment should not be a year in prison for stealing one candy bar. So it has to fit the crime. There's not supposed to be any excessive fines or any excessive bail either. Number 9 is powers reserved to the people. So this one says, or this one prevents the government from claiming that the only rights people have are those listed in the Bill of Rights. Uh, so just because there's a list of rights doesn't mean that the government can take away other rights that aren't listed here. For example, it doesn't say that you have a right to a job, but that would be something that would be reserved for the people. Or you have the right to dye your hair, or you have the right to clean drinking water, or you have the right to eat junk food. Right? So those might not be listed in the Constitution, but they aren't taken away from you. You should still have those rights. And the last one is the 10th Amendment, which is sort of sounds very similar here, but it says powers not given to the US government but not denied to the states are given to the states and people. So an example would be to do with marriages or schools. So marriages and schools, those aren't listed for powers, those aren't listed as powers for the federal government, and they're not denied to the states, which means those powers would go into the states. All right, so those are the 10 amendments or the Bill of Rights.